Aloha, and welcome to our 2022 Maui County interviews that we're doing. And today we have Dan Johnson, who's running for representative for State District 12 House. He's a Republican and actually did quite well in the primary elections with 1,145 votes. Again, that's for a Republican. And I think it may be reflective of some of Dan's platform and where he's coming from and his background. So welcome, Dan. Nice to have you with us.
Hey, Paul. Hey, guys. Thanks for having me on again.
So Dan, to start off, in terms of your background, why do you feel qualified to run for this important state representative seat? And what are the things that you would like the audience to know about your background that makes you qualified like this? So go ahead.
Yeah, some of that, what you're saying is, resonating with people across party lines. It seems like we live in a system that's increasingly more, our team, your team kind of thing. But I don't really see it that way. The thing that motivates me is family. So my banners and signs say I want to put Maui families first, and that's true. I mean, I was born and raised here. I have family going back generations to World War II. It was the first time they came here. I am a father of two kids. My wife as well, of course. And then I have a 5-year-old boy that just started going to public school in Pukalani, and then a 3-year-old daughter. We've been heavily invested in the community through different things and community outreach things that we do through our church, as well as I also do some other nonprofit stuff that I help with. But primarily, I'm a project manager for a general contractor, and I've been doing this for about 7 years since I got out of school. And we do renewable energy programs and commercial PV projects, things like that, and then commercial construction. And I've done some state works projects, and mostly in construction industry is what my career experience has been in. But I've crossed over paths with government. I'm aware of, regulations, procedures, permitting, and things like that, right, on the county and state levels. Also, I've even done some federal projects too, working at airports and whatnot. But anyway, outside of that, my heart for people putting families first ahead of corporate interest, I think, is showing across the board with, it's nice that we have transparent campaign donations so you can see who's taking money from what, because that's also, where your treasure is, that's where your heart will be also. So I'd encourage everybody to look into their candidates, who they're voting for, and, what they're being encouraged to support, whether if you like those things or not, that should go into it. But anyway, I am not a career politician, looking to advance the interest of Maui County people, residents, and also represent the state of Hawaii as a whole. So having been a resident for my whole life, not planning on going anywhere, I want to fight for Maui and Hawaii and make it affordable to live here. And, we look at a, path to home ownership for people is getting bleaker and bleaker as time goes on. So there's really a need to step up now. And that's why I felt encouraged to do so, because the particular seat for District 12 for representative where I'm running wasn't even challenged in the past couple general elections. So all the more reason, some people that are close to me were telling me, you talk about this stuff so much, why don't you do something about it, instead of just, yeah.
So Dan, I have a follow-up question. You mentioned your involvement with Civic Engagement, and could you be a little bit more specific about that in terms of things that you've been involved in and that you're passionate about here in our community, actual specific initiatives and things?
Yeah, the most recent one, as far as civic engagement and the governance process, was not a state issue, but it is related to state issue. The water rights and water distribution, water management authority. I provided testimony at Maui County for the support of the water rights being in the hands of the county rather than in a foreign corporate company that has a vested interest in water ahead of the people to manage it. So I spoke at the county council on behalf, as a private citizen, on behalf of Maui residents, and just for the sentiment of the way what I did is I literally read the Hawaii revised statutes that say the the benefits of the water are for the benefits of the people. I mean, the rights and inherent privileges and access uses are strictly for the benefit of the people and shall be managed, to perpetuate that, more along those lines. So anyway, yeah, that's the most recent one that I went to go support and speak against, and for, rather.
Okay, well, certainly that's going to be up in terms of the charter amendments that are coming up. That'll be one of them that'll be for the voters to look at on the November ballot. So I'm glad you're in support of that. Many of us here at the Maui Pono Network also are. So Asia, you're next up for questions.
Hi, Dan. Thanks so much for being here. It's nice to get to know you a little better through this. Do you think the current state legislature is effective, and why or why not?
They're effective at getting what they want done. I don't know if that's necessarily in the best interest of the people, as I was alluding to earlier. But at the same time, there's also a lot of inefficiency and ineffectiveness. So when we were looking at the executive privileges, for instance, our legislature was able to pass a motion to require 2/3 majority override of a executive order. And that passed through to the governor's desk. And of course, he vetoed it, but they weren't able to push that through. So that's an interesting one. But as far as our budgets go, and I'm just to preface this, I'm all for transparency in things, and also fiscal responsibility when it comes to government and what we're spending our money on and the citizens' money on. So I highly encourage audits, and basically not so much just to cut things without looking at it, but actually understand what money is being spent, where it's going, why it's being spent there, and make sure it's needed. So in my travels, I've seen actually a lot of things. You can see some of my stuff on my Instagram and YouTube channels where I comment on it. But anyway, yeah, the state can be streamlined, at least from what I've seen in the construction side of things through Department of Accounting and General Services and other things like that. There's Department of Education, administration, and stuff like that. There's a lot of overhead that just needs to be validated, in my opinion. But yes, the state is good at spending money on things that we don't necessarily know that we need, like the 30-meter telescope and the rail and all those other things that they find ways to do.
So what I hear you saying is that you feel like they're effective at spending money poorly. And
yes.
That makes me think maybe you would want, like, what committees, if you were to win this election, what committees do you see yourself serving on?
So I majored in finance, at least for my undergrad degree. I would happily go into the finance committees, look at budgeting it for capital improvements. Like, I would be comfortable in overseeing, honestly, really anything. But I think finance would be my key strength as far as my background goes. But I also have a lengthy construction background, so I'd happily look into other programs like for transportation, even Department of Education for facilities and those things.
Interesting. And that's interesting because the person that you're running against, the incumbent, is the chair of the finance committee and has been for a while, and has wielded a lot of power through being the head of the finance committee. Do you find yourself disagreeing with what he's done there in the finance committee, or agreeing, or do you feel like that's a good, I guess I'm asking even more specifically, do you feel like Maui's representatives have been effective in what they are meant to do?
Yeah, I mean, they've certainly brought a bunch of money back here. There's all the bulletins, and they're proud to tell you about everything that they're spending money on for different improvements. And, the state is responsible for several things, from every type of infrastructure, from like highways to schools and airports and all things like that, which are essential needs that need to be taken care of. But I think beyond how much money you're looking at it in volume is coming through, I think it should qualitatively be spent better. And then when you actually look at what you're getting, what you're paying for, we have about the second highest tax burden on citizens as far as income tax. All those adjusted cost of living things might even actually make us probably the most expensive state in the nation to live to. But anyway, we have the second highest income tax to California, and our state budget is about like 23 or 24% goes to education, but yet we can't pay teachers a living wage. And then we have this huge balloon of unfunded liabilities as well. I think it was somewhere around 12 or 14 billion last I looked. But anyway, there's definitely a lot of money moving around, and you can say, yeah, I secured these funds to do X, Y, and Z, but did it need to be that much? And were those things spent appropriately? And beyond the funds side and finance side of things, there's a lot of things that I will bring from a completely different perspective that aren't even being represented, I feel. Thus the reason why I wanted to step forward, because we have a lot of things structurally in the government that we need to change, from the legislature to the executive and judicial branches, all having different misbalances and mismatches. We have probably about the most executive authority in the governor, in the governor's office, than any other state in the nation. We don't have elected school boards. We don't have elected sheriffs. We don't have a lot of these other things that other states have to provide checks and balances along the way, whereas our governor has a lot of authority to do all of those things and navigate them. And then in addition to that, I'm not bought by anybody. I don't have, I'm not going to push along projects that are going to make certain special interests advance. I'm not saying that those things are happening in this area, but it's definitely something to be aware of, that I'm for Maui people, Maui residents, and Hawaii residents and families first.
Awesome. Thank you for those very exhaustive answers. That's great. I'd like to turn the time over to the next question interviewer.
That would be me, Bruce. So Dan, the state is a bit of a snake pit, shall we put it bluntly. All sorts of interests, buddy things happening, backdoor deals, committee chairmans having all the power. In one of the most Democrat states in the country, you're running as a Republican. How will you navigate the Hawaii snake pit?
Snake pit makes me think of Indiana Jones. Snakes.
Snake pit.
But anyway, goes to say that I'm running for the representative seat, but the Senate seat is currently up for election because the Senate that's in there was appointed to replace someone who was convicted of corruption and is going to do almost 4 years in prison. So those kinds of things provide some hope that there could be a little more transparency in our system. And then as far as outside of the malintent, as you're referring to, I think that there's a real bipartisan possibility, because I'm not looking to go make battles when I get in there. I'm going to just state my case and lay out my platform, whatever it is, or my logic on why I'm voting for a certain bill, because it's going to come from the heart. So the heart for me, like I said, I can't say it enough. We need to put Maui families first, and look at it through that lens. Does this do that? Does putting, this telescope on the top of the mountain put Maui families first? Does this development of another hotel or, sale of DLNR land to do this advance the interest of Maui people? Issuing this lease for water rights to this company, is this the best interest for Maui people? So from that lens, that's where I'm going to come from. And I think that there's a lot of reason to be done regardless. So that's why I said, take the little elephant pin off of my sleeve, and I'm going to speak from what I believe is going to put us first, you know what I mean? As people, as individuals and local small businesses.
Fantastic. Part two of that question would be, most people run as a Democrat in Hawaii just because Democrats win and Democrats rule. And so they just automatically, whether they believe in the Democrat Party principles or not, run as a Democrat. You've chosen a Republican. Can you share your reasons for your choice?
I do think it's actually a good time to be a Republican in not only Hawaii, but in the nation, because a lot of times when we go through a midterm election, you see kind of a shift of balance go back and forth, because if we have too much power unchecked in any direction, it can be a problem. And unfortunately, Hawaii has had Democrat control for 60 years. So then if you don't like the way things are, you might as well try something different, you know? And I have personally been a Republican or libertarian leaning for most of my life. But yeah, nonetheless, it's who I am and it's what I believe. So it's what I'm stepping forward with.
Thank you for that. A bold move. And yeah, I've always, a one-party state is kind of like the Communist Party. When you have one party running, it's an unfair thing. So I commend you for stepping forward. And with that, I will pass it to Ann.
Hi, Dan. Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
I wanted to address this when Roe v. Wade got overturned by the Supreme Court recently. There was like about expected half the nation, half the states to impose a ban with severe restrictions on abortion. And I just want to know what your position is on women's rights, like access to safe and legal abortion, and LGBTQ rights.
Mm-hmm. So within our state legislature, I believe it's like 347 or 340. I can't remember off the top of my mind, but I read it recently. And actually, we currently have a mechanism in place that when the Dobbs decision overturned Roe v. Wade, providing that back to the state to decide on, there's already a mechanism within our state that says abortion can occur if there's a vital risk to the mother or if it's an unviable fetus. So that I can agree with as it is. However, I am personally a Christian. I'm a believer that life is important and needs to be protected. So I guess the only thing in there is that what is that definition of viable life, and what is that established at a certain period in time? Because currently it's not in our law. So it just says if it's non-viable. What does that mean? What does non-viable mean? It's something that needs to be discussed. And a lot of states right now across the nation are establishing that at about 15 weeks or so. So you got to make up your decision within that time frame. And that's likely to be something that comes to the floor at the House to decide on. And that's about where my heart would be.
So just to clarify, did you say you do not oppose abortion as long as it's 15 weeks or less?
Yeah, that's about where the status quo is as far as what's being passed right now across the board.
I see.
So yeah, I mean, actually, here's a good example. So my wife and I, we have two kids. When we were first getting pregnant, all of our OBs and doctors and things that we were talking to were telling us, don't, announce that you have a pregnancy until like 12 weeks, because something like 85% of miscarriages occur in the first, trimester there. So after that point, it's very reasonable that life can become or be considered viable after that point.
Okay. So you would, your point or your position would that it could be maintained legal in Hawaii as long as it's 15 weeks or less, the pregnancy. Unintended pregnancy, or doesn't have a reason why the termination would just be, or would have to be based on the viability, or not quite certain what you mean. But
no, I guess it's like it's kind of like apples and oranges, to be honest, when people are debating it. Is it pro-choice or is it pro-life? And then they don't actually take into consideration how important either actually are. So when we look at something like abortion or a child that's going to be born, right? That's, to me, important. So when you're looking at a decision, I don't think that decision affects just you. So at a certain point, if you have a 4-month-old baby in someone's stomach, it's very likely statistically to become a human being after that. And as it keeps going, it's like if you were to put a cake in the oven and you're saying, well, you put the batter in and the batter goes in and it's for an hour, and then you take the batter out and you throw it on the ground and you say it's not a cake yet. And we're like, oh, well, it certainly would have been in an hour, type of thing. But to steal that from a comedian that I heard recently. But anyway, all jokes aside, this isn't a funny matter, but the essence is you're talking about choice versus life, and some things don't consider that life could become, or life is, or what value is life at a certain point. So yeah, and then we also can take the same conversation of choice and life with vaccine mandates, vaccine requirements. But I think that the key difference is that there's nothing going to grow from that that's gonna change. So like I don't see the same argument being said for wanting to take something into your body or requiring someone to take a injection of some sort, because it may or may not, even though for this particular one I'm insinuating it actually does not have any significant effect on anyone else. But the choice doesn't actually take away someone else's life. So the whole pro-choice, pro-life thing, I think, are really bad labels, to be honest.
Okay. And what about LGBTQ rights? I know there's a lot of states banning books and banning gender affirming services. And
I don't think we allow any kind of discrimination of any kind, and I wouldn't really support any kind of discrimination. I know we have the federal civil rights acts and everything that protect that. I'm not readily aware of any statute offhand on LGBTQ rights and protections, but I certainly would not be, removing anything like that. I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Well, some states have imposed bans on books, LGBTQ books in the schools, gender affirming surgeries. Trying to think what else I can remember, but
yeah, I mean, as far as that goes,
it's discriminatory. Yes.
If you're talking about age and things like that, I think that whatever it is, it should definitely have consent. Like, you're not going to change someone's gender forcefully, right? Sure. But yeah, as long as they're consenting and if they're a minor and if they have parental consent, that's their life to live.
I see. All right. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and I will do the next question. So, Dan, you've alluded to already when you talked about water and water rights that home rule is something that makes a lot of sense in that respect for water. But also we have that home rule issue happening for our agricultural department that we started here in the county. And also we have, I think, a great need to have home rule regarding school, our education system. And also other areas like, for example, I was just in the great meeting with the county council, and they passed a resolution to have counties adjust the livable wage for each of the different counties. So Maui County would be able to adjust that based on the needs and relationship with the businesses that would make sense. So where do you stand when it comes to home rule, taking these things away from the central controlled I guess you can call them corporate Democrats, to one where it becomes down to more to the county level where we can adjust for our local needs?
Yeah, actually, really good question. So, like I mentioned earlier, we have one of the most powerful executive branches in any state. So, our governor has a lot of authority. He has a lot of sway. I would totally be supportive of having constitutionally elected sheriffs. I would have, elected school boards, elected attorney general, and some states even go as far as like electing their secretary of state. So those are all different things that provide different levels of accountability across the board, rather than just saying, I'm the governor and I want this guy to be it because X, Y, and Z. And then especially if he's a governor of a party that also has unanimous control, unless he really picks a bad apple or an underqualified person, his party and is going to confirm it, throughout the legislature. But anyway, we could do some constitutional amendments to allow those things to be there so people have more choices on the ballot box. And when it comes to things that aren't working well, that's all the more reason that if people are actually campaigning and have a fire under their seat for effectuating their job well, you'll see a better product. I mean, I work in the private business world, and I can tell you, if I certainly don't do my job, I won't have it. So anyway, those are things that I support. And then as far as bringing power down from the state to the county, yeah, I absolutely support that too. So the water infrastructure, like we were talking about, the water distribution and water management authority, that's something where the state and the DLNR ultimately are the ones who issue the lease. And then the county would then take out the management and distribution thereof. So it doesn't mean that we need to have this over controlling state government that's saying, this is our piping, this is our infrastructure, and I have my water authority doing all this. No, we actually have a county for a reason. So we don't have just a state, so we have different layers of government from the federal down to the counties. And even to some extent, it's a form of governance. You even have like homeowners associations and things like that, extra government. But anyway, I definitely support individual freedoms and rights because we are from the same nation. We're all the same people, but we ultimately have different lifestyle choices and different representations. And by the definition of the job being a representative, you got to be a representative of your populace. So, and that speaks in itself by getting elected. So here I am, this is what I believe, and this is what I want to do. Vote for me or vote for the same thing. But then that level coming down to different layers, having more authority over who your school boards are, or your superintendents of the schools, the sheriff, and other things like that, and also letting the state take the leash back on some things to let the counties decide them, and then the counties ultimately manage them. There's different layers of accountability that are built in there, so that's a good thing in my opinion.
So in terms of accountability and I guess where the listening is for a lot of our corporate Democrats that are presently in power, and one that we would like to see unseated in the area that you're working in right now for this district. When you look at that level of loyalty towards big money interest versus loyalty towards the people and the INA, is that something that you would stand for and be a champion for, so that we get out of this, and that's maybe coming from a Republican, maybe something that people normally don't associate that with Republicans. So could you clarify where you're at with all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I am not bought or sold in any direction other than just my population, and for Maui residents, Maui families, and residents of Hawaii. So I like the term that you use, corporate Democrats. I might have to steal that some more. That's actually a good term because they're totally their own animal. I mean, if you were to look at what their platform is in the nation as a whole, I would almost say that Hawaii is sort of flipped with the narratives to an extent, because all the Republican, or most of the Republican candidates, I would say, are grassroots. They're coming from the, civil liberties mindset for individuals, and not actually being some big business interest, which, as the the national narrative would actually typically be, more or less. But anyway, the sentiment is that, again, Maui families first. So when it comes to this representative seat in this district, I certainly am not going to change my mind how I vote based on donors or random personal interests. Like, my net worth is a 28-year debt on a home that I might pay off one day, and my kids. That's my interest in this community.
Great. Thank you for that, Dan. Asia, you're next.
So if you were elected, what bills do you see yourself championing or writing? Sorry, forgetting how to speak my words here. What bills do you see yourself writing and presenting right off the bat? What would you like to see done?
Oh, there's so many. It's so difficult, to be honest. This might be the longest answer, depending. You can rein me in if I start going too long. But yeah, the main reason I started running was our freedoms were restricted egregiously the past 2 years here. We need to amend our Constitution to not allow as much executive privilege, but not so that we restrict it so it can't be there in case of real emergency. But these like 14-day extensions forever, for whatever reason. We need to make sure that if there is a serious emergency, that swift action can be taken, but we need to amend it so that there's an override from either the legislature or the judicial branch. And there needs to be an established punishment for overreach. But yeah, we need to fix that as a constitutional amendment there. And then also, there's actually quite a lot of amendments to do, like I said, for providing the different layers of accountability and different elected positions. Amend it so that we can elect a school board, elect a superintendent, and a sheriff, and some other things that I had mentioned before, without going over too much. But yeah, there's some significant changes that need to be proposed. And then for the people here, cost of living being ridiculous, one thing that I'm really looking forward to proposing is an alteration to how we tax real property. So as a lifelong resident here with family, and some family that's native going back generations before they can even remember, they have land that they have been effectively taxed out on because of inheritance tax and property gain, capital gains tax, and the synergy property tax, effectively by having a home in an area where other people are developing and driving up the cost. And if you don't live there, then it's just going crazy, and then you have to offload and are being squeezed out of paradise, So there's things like that we need to amend to put priority for Hawaii residents to retain land, like circuit breakers or something like that to achieve that. And then also we have this huge demand for a small supply of housing. So we've got people that are willing to pay over asking price, and especially while interest rates are low, or were low, it just went ridiculous. And because of Hawaii's small inventory, our housing market never really crashes. So, we look at $1.1 million for the median home sale price. That's not going to be possible for myself. And I would say even have a comfortable job. I actually am proud and comfortable where I'm at, but I couldn't afford that. Luckily, my wife and I got in before that. But yeah, it's just people are hooeying together more than they should. And people who have made more money elsewhere are willing to, just have an investment property or a second or third home that they might even stay in for a month. So what happens is, we have the property tax, which we do not want to increase property tax because that could increase rents. So we don't want to increase rents because that'll increase, housing costs on people who aren't able to afford a home. But I want to create a path to home ownership because I believe that home ownership is the best way to financial freedom. And I think that we can do this by buying a buffer back between outside buyers and local residents. So there already exists a mechanism within HRS 247, which is the real property tax code. So conveyance taxes. And I looked at this and I think this is something that we can really look at and probably get bipartisan support on, because hey, they want to raise taxes on someone. So anyway, the conveyance tax is a tax borne on the seller, and the seller is effectively taxed at a premium if he sells a property to a non-owner occupant. So this came across me when I refinanced my home during those lower interest rates, and I had to do a conveyance tax affidavit saying that I'm going to be an owner occupant of my own property when I sell it. And I started looking into it. Wow, where am I paying my taxes to? So I started looking into some of this stuff, and I came across this. So basically on a $800,000 home, which is an affordable house right now, you're taxed somewhere around like 20 cents per $100 of value. And then if you're an owner occupant, but if you're not an owner occupant, the seller is taxed about double, like 40 cents or something like that. So that's the difference between like $2,000 to $4,000. It's not really that much, but if that was increased for single family property being sold to non-owner occupants, so like a business, an LLC, or someone who's just owning it to rent it. So this is any new sale and only on sales. If we increase that to like $4 or $5 per $100 of value, get really aggressive with it, and have something like effectively an 8% tax or 10%, I don't know what, we'll have to navigate what the market could hold. But basically, if we were to create a buffer of, let's use round numbers, if we have $1 million home sale and you're going to be taxed 80 grand if you sell to an investor, but if you sell to a local owner occupant, you don't pay any tax. What you've done there is you've just put more purchasing power in local families' hands when they're buying property.
Okay,
So
thank you for that, Dan. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Those were very good answers. So thank you for that, Dan.
that comes from the finance side of things. It's not as exciting to talk about, but there's actual effectual change can be made in those types of areas.
Great. Next, we'll have Bruce.
Hi. So we went through an amazing strain of our economics with the global pandemic. Do you feel it's important that we create a committee to investigate our successes and our failures in response to a pandemic and how to respond in the future?
Yeah, I could see some value in that, especially for this past one, because we just had a breach of freedoms and a breach of rights as well. So beyond just that aspect of it, you can't really move forward without analyzing how well you've done, because 2020 is always hindsight. 2020, but it's also a good example to look at where failures were, what things could have been done better, and maybe things took too long that shouldn't have, or we have procedures that are irrelevant and not needed anymore. So yeah, totally, I agree.
And as a follow-up to that, would you consider, let's say in England, they now are giving people up to $150,000 equivalent if they've been vaccine injured. Right now, there is no liability from the vaccine companies. How do you feel? Do you feel that's correct, and do you feel there is some remedy for that situation?
Oh, I'm not familiar with that going through. So that's not the state or the government paying it. That's making the manufacturer pay.
Making the manufacturer pay.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's so unprecedented. They had this affidavit or whatever. They made people sign like a waiver of liability, but then at the same time you had your government mandating it, which kind of might put the government in a little bit of liability possibly. But I think that we definitely should hold people responsible for something that they directly caused, whether if it was malintent or not, even if it was just negligence or unpreparedness.
Thank you for that, Dan. With that, I'll pass it to Anne.
Hi, Dan. I wanted to address this issue of campaign finance reform, and in the wake of all these bribery scandals, I think there's been some measures to impose caps on the amount that somebody can for campaign donors. And, there's been a lot of really prolific campaign donors and even family members of those people are giving huge donations. And how do you feel about campaign reform? I know you said something about wanting term limits.
Yeah.
Also benefit that.
Yeah, term limits definitely reduce the likelihood of buying one candidate out for 20 or 30 years.
Right.
So then that helps combat that naturally. So absolutely, term limits are something I support and would propose, co-author, sponsor, whatever, happily. But as far as campaign finance, we're looking at, just at least my experience with this in our state is what I'm required to do, which is effectively just me and my interest. But having looked into it and being able to look into it further, it would be nice to see family members and other things like that. So you might have a declared donation to a candidate or an elected official, which could be declared at whatever the limit is and be kosher within that. But then for different layers, there's definitely a lot more sway and authority. So when you look at like a governor or a mayor or something like that, they have the ability to effectuate a lot of action. And I would be okay with looking at family members of those positions. I mean, it's by definition, it's public service. It's not going to be a fun job. It shouldn't be something that you jump in there to say, you get on my shoulders and follow me. I have all the answers. And we got to have term limits to make sure that these things, and whoever this is a servant leader. And if you don't fit the bill, if you're not going to be somebody that's, clean, so to say, or if you got stuff to hide, you probably shouldn't run for office. And we need good people with good intentions. And, I mean, that could be a tough pill to swallow, to be honest, but like have to reveal your son's business dealings publicly, or have to reveal your wife or cousin's, because if I award this contract to so-and-so, I might not get a donation directly, but who's to say he doesn't, that kind of thing is likely going on. I don't have any specific examples that are confirmed other than, like we said, we mentioned the Kalani English thing and a few other, convicted cases. So definitely shine the light, see where it's at.
Yeah, some of the candidates made a big statement that they would not accept any more than $100 per donation. And I really like that, although it takes a lot of money to run a campaign.
Yeah. And then, I mean, I haven't gotten a significant amount of money anyway, but there's expense to be had. I mean, like you spend money to put out signs, banners, mailers are really expensive too. And especially when you have a district that has 4,000 to 8,000 voters or 10,000 voters, and you're mailing out, I don't know how good that is for the environment as well, how much they're actually effective. Exactly. But mail out all these little spiels that, like, you read about me, vote for me, this is what I want, beyond all that stuff is another consideration, but it costs money to do those things. So there's certainly money needed. And for instance, I can't do mailers, but I'm going to go sign wave and I'm going to go door knock, and I got some door knocking materials. But yeah, there's funds needed to be effective in what you're doing. And then, with our geography, especially the people who represent larger areas, multiple islands, like the congressmen, the senators, and the governors and lieutenant governors, they got to be flying around and doing things. So there's definitely money that needs to come through. It just needs to be very clear and clarified. I do like, trying to operate more grassroots as possible.
I see.
Thank you for that. And I'm just going to ask Dan the very last question that we have then, and that is there anything that we have not covered that you would like our audience to know about you and your campaign and platform at this time?
Yeah, I'd just like to add a summary for those of you guys that are watching. So thanks for staying through with all this. I mean, I hope that I've revealed my heart of who I am and what I stand for, and that's to be a representative, a servant leader, if you will. I'm from here. I don't want to go anywhere else, and I'm going to fight to make sure that my children have an interest to live here and not be pushed away like some of their cousins have been. And then I'm for Maui families first, small business, personal freedom, personal responsibility, reduced regulation, reduced taxes on us, and also for just letting people live however they want, as far as that goes, and enjoying the aloha spirit,
Great. Thank you, Dan, for this and for taking the time for this interview. And thank you for running for this state representative seat, a very important seat. We need good representation for our state. So again, thank you for that and for letting people know where you stand on a lot of these issues. You can, the viewers can also go to mauipononetwork.org, and you can get this interview as well as nearly 30 other interviews on our website under candidates. Also, this will be also broadcast at Akaku TV and will be scheduled and rotated throughout till the November election. So again, Dan, thank you. And thank you for all our viewers. And we look forward to connecting with you during our next interview that we'll be having fairly soon. Mahalo.